So across human history and literature, many great figures have carved their names into the tapestry of human achievement and imagination. Now, Fate's done a good job getting a lot of those names into its series as heroic spirits, which is great, except Fate is limited and human history is vast, and it doesn't always get around to those characters or those people very quickly. Now, most of us can be patient. However, a certain person aping their name from an Egyptian goddess has held me at knife point and told me I need to design fan servants around these characters. Now, I like my life, so I went ahead and obliged. And the name that came up the most was Olga of Kiyv. Now, like any good weeb, my first question was, who the fuck is Olga of Kiyv? So I'm going to turn this over to said fake Egyptian goddess to tell you who the fuck Olga of Kiyv is.
Olga of Kiyv stands out from the absolute quagmire of Slavic history as one of its most notable rulers. A low bar to clear, but one that she nonetheless clears quite easily. Slavic historical records are sadly lacking compared to most notable areas of Eurasia as a result of how written language was introduced to the culture. The primary chronicle, also known as the Tale of Bygone Years, or Pavest Vremeni Klet, which details the life of Olga and the early history of the Ruriks, is one of the oldest written sources of collected Slavic history, and is believed to have been composed and compiled in the 1110s. However, the oldest extant version that is largely complete is the Laurentian Codex from 1377. Technically, the Novgorod First Chronicle is of older origin. However, most of what we know from the chronicle is from the Snyod scroll that was dated to the 13th century, and its inclusion in 15th and 16th century texts that disagree with the primary chronicle. The chronicle, however, has many glaring inconsistencies between extant versions and known dates, and as such, historians have had no choice but to doubt its accuracy. Unfortunately, there are few earlier records of Slavic history. According to our records, Olga was born of potential Viking descent in Pleskov, or Vibuti, sometime between 890 and 925 ACE. Almost nothing is known about her life before her marriage, at the age of maybe 15 or 16, to Prince Igor, claimed to be the son of Rurik, the founder of the Rurikid dynasty of the Kievan Rus. Igor did not succeed Rurik, as after Rurik, Oleg the Wise held regency and consolidated the state further before Igor came to power. While Igor was in power, the neighboring tribe, the Drevlians, were growing concerned over the power the Rus were gaining. They had aided the Rus against the Byzantines and had paid tribute to Rurik and Oleg, but ended these relationships when Igor gained power. As a result, Igor would ride to their capital of Iskarosten in 945 to regain their tribute with an army. His forces were overwhelming, and the Drevlians agreed, but as his forces returned to Kiev, he decided to pursue further tribute and doubled back with a smaller force. When he arrived back in the Drevlians' territory, they turned on him and murdered him. With his death, Olga became regent for her son, Sviatoslav, who was too young to rule, making her the first ruling queen of the dynasty. Following these actions, and high on their perceived successes, the Drevlians would send emissaries to Olga, 20 men arriving in her court to pass along the message that they had slain her husband, and that Olga should come and marry their Prince Mal. Olga, being a cunning woman, replied with the following lines: "Your proposal is pleasing to me indeed. My husband cannot rise again from the dead. But I desire to honor you tomorrow in the presence of my people. Return now to your boat, and remain there with an aspect of arrogance. I shall send for you on the morrow, and you shall say, 'We will not ride on our horses, nor go on foot. Carry us in our boat,' and you shall be carried in your boat." The following day, assured of the honor that she had promised them, the Drevlian emissaries waited outside of the palace, telling the people what Olga had told them to say. The people carried them to a trench that Olga had ordered dug the previous day, and had them buried alive inside of it, asking them, as the dirt was poured over them, whether or not they enjoyed their honor. Immediately following this, Olga sent a messenger to the Drevlians, who knew not the fate of the first group. In this message, she told the Drevlians to send their most distinguished men to her in Kiev, so that she could be properly honored in her journey to their capital, to marry their leader, Prince Mal. When the second group arrived, she had her people lead them to the bathhouses, and once they entered, she barred them in and set fire to the bathhouses. She then sent another message, the Drevlians still unaware of the fates of their kinsmen, asking that they prepare a great feast with meat and alcohol in the city where her husband had died, at his tomb, so that she could properly honor his death before her marriage. She and her attendants traveled to the city, where a large funeral feast was held, and she wept and wailed over his tomb. The Drevlians sat down to feast and drank heavily. As soon as they were drunk, Olga ordered her people to murder them all, according to the primary chronicle, actively encouraging them the entire time, and killing some 5,000 Drevlians before she returned to Kiev to ready her armies to destroy what was left. Olga and her armies handily won the first conflicts of the war and laid siege to Iskorostan, the city where her husband was killed. The siege lasted for over a year, and she would eventually send a message to the leaders of the city, asking why they still held out even when all other areas had submitted and given tribute, and were now returned to their peaceful lives. The leaders responded that they feared her anger over her husband's death was still large, and she would not allow for peace. Olga responded that the actions committed against her messengers were enough to slake the vengeance, and asked for 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from every house to be sent to her as a tribute. The city, glad of such a small request, gladly sent the birds. In return, Olga had pieces of sulfur burning attached to every bird, and at nightfall they were all lit and freed to return to their roosts in the city, carrying the burning sulfur. As the primary chronicle tells it, there was not a house that was not consumed, and it was impossible to extinguish the flames, because all the houses caught fire at once. As people fled the city, she killed some and captured many others as slaves. The remainder were left to pay tribute. As regent, Olga was beloved and made many influential changes. She enacted the first legal reform in Eastern Europe, altering the tribute system known as poljudi, similar to the Viking right of hospitality. On her journey back to Kiev after defeating the Drevlians, she established laws, hunting reserves, and trade posts that exist still today, centralizing state rule through trade centers called pogosti, which held both administrative and mercantile centers. Her son would, after her death, move his capital to one of these pogosti to be nearer to the wealth, riches, and administration of the Kievan Rus. Her trade centers also likely proved instrumental in the ethnic and cultural unification of the Rus, and for first defining boundaries of the empire to be. Throughout her life, she also maintained constant rejection of marriage offers so as to reserve all the power to be passed on to her son when he came of age, and often participated in defending the city during his military campaigns, up to the siege of Kiev by the Pecheneg's only a few months before her death. Years later, in the 950s, Olga converted to Christianity during a visit to Constantinople with the help of the Emperor Constantine VII and the Patriarch Polyeuctus. She was christened as Helena, and the primary chronicle says that Constantine repeatedly asked her to marry him, but her inclusion of him in her baptism cunningly made them spiritually kin, and therefore made this incest, allowing her to once more maintain her independence. In the chronicle, Olga never remarried, as a large part of her character is this maintained independence and refusal of many marriage proposals. Most other records do not document such a request, as Constantine already had an empress at the time, and some versions list her as having been baptized in Kiev before her visit to Constantinople. Olga then took the patriarch's blessing in her journey home and tried to convert her son to Christianity as she had been. He refused, but did agree to halt all prosecution of those who did convert within the Kievan Rus, marking a huge turning point in the spread of Christianity throughout the area. Olga would also go on to build Christian churches throughout the Rus lands and interacted with the Emperor Otto I as well. She died of illness in 969 according to the primary chronicle, with Christian rites performed over her body rather than pagan. A large portion of the Rus people mourned, led by her son and grandsons. Her final resting place remained in Kiev, even though her son moved the center of the Rus soon after her death, for 2 centuries until the Mongols destroyed Kiev, and a sarcophagus believed to be hers was eventually excavated in 1826 on the site of the first stone church in Kiev and moved to a new resting place. While her son didn't continue in her journey of Christianization, her grandson, Vladimir I Sviatoslavich, also known as Vladimir the Great, did officially adopt Christianity and was canonized as Saint Vladimir, likely alongside Olga herself, although records list her sainthood from the 1500s. She is venerated especially in the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Ruthenian Greek Catholic Church, and the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, who call Olga by the honorific Isapostolos, or equal to the apostles. Olga today is the patron saint of widows and converts, and her feast day is July 11th.
Thank you very much for that history lecture, Seki. So, a fun little quirk that we're doing here, and hopefully this sets us apart from other little fan servant things that have been done online, is we actually had a friend of ours, an artist, handle doing some design work for the fan servant today. So without any further ado, this is what our friend came up with for Olga of Kiyv. This artwork is by winterwolf_drawings on Instagram. This slideshow, by the way, will be available in the description if I'm not wrong. And if you reach this slide in the description, the follow on Instagram there is a link to the Instagram. So please go give some support.
We were lucky enough to get an audio file from my friend who did the artwork, Winterwolf, and I transcribed this mostly in its entirety. I took out some buts and ums, but mostly kept it the same. So she said, I changed my ideas slightly. The first image ended up being more embellished. Both have a fire, mage, Romani inspiration, as I thought of her as someone wanting nothing but to be free. in reference to wanting to keep away from remarrying. So I thought fire. Fire has beauty. Fire has willingness to not be controlled by others. As for the red, I thought red resembled something flaming and mystical and desired. Red is simply a beautiful color. I felt like that would be great for her. Between the first and second art, I kept the deep V of her dress but added more cleavage, longer unkempt hair, and darkened the color. Both pictures show her controlling fire, discovering her ability in the first image, and use in the second. Hands are hard, so I just didn't do the hands. I also made the focal point more her jewelry and face as a contrast between the two. In the full body art, the whole outfit is more the focal point, with a small amount of midriff, which I thought was cool. I wanted to try and give her some babushka feel, with Romani inspiration to tie in mystic ideas in geographic areas. Oh, I also had time to make a third art. So, Winterwolf was given as inspiration, the historical information that I read out here earlier, as well as a few servants to look at as a general reference, as she's not familiar with fate. So we gave her this list of servants, and then the instructions given to her were, do what you want. In the future, if we do this again, go wild, but maybe stick to a human design this time.
So, I did come up with an entire ass kit here. I get a lot of experience from this. This is actually pretty normal for me. If you've followed our channel for a while, you know that I've done in the background, I've been taking our channel members, or not channel members, but the crew, the anime club. I've been taking us through a D&D campaign based on FGO, and at times I either create new servants or I have filled in the blanks where there are servants stuck in NPC jail. So a lot of that I kind of took in, and it was easier. It was doing that, except not having to add D&D mechanics. So, to start off with, I came up with stats. A lot of these are going to be in reference to very similar servants in terms of what I was going for with the kit here. So, think your Jeanne d'Arc, think a lot of rulers I was in reference here for. So, I gave her C rank strength, B rank endurance, C agility, B mana, A luck, and her NP is an A rank, which a little bit of not a foreshadowing, but a heads up to what that rank's going to look like in the future. So for her passive skills, I've given her Magic Resistance EX. That's pretty normal for rulers, actually. And you might notice Oblivion Correction B and Avenger A. So her class is actually of the ruler class. Those are Avenger skills. That's because I've taken Semirami's skill, the double summon skill, and I've applied it here. She is a ruler that is also functionally an Avenger. A couple other skills I've given her are Deceptive Tactics A, Subjugation of the Drevlians C, Patron Saint of Widows and Converts C. And I'm going to go into more detail on these skills here in a second, actually. So for Magic Resistance EX, I've given a little blurb here. It's a lot of what you've seen with other rulers. There's not much of a reason to go over that again, but rulers do tend towards having a higher magic resistance. For Oblivion Correction B, this is one of the class skills of the Avenger. It's kind of a you hit me, I hit you back harder kind of deal. And then there's Avenger A. I have a bit of a typo there. Fuck me.
So
But yeah, she's gonna, like, personality wise, if you can't get this, she's gonna have she's a little fiery, I think. On to the more active skills. I have a lot more commentary on these than the passives, because the passives are pretty copy paste. The active skill for double summon, my thought here is she is the patron saint of widows and converts, but behind that, like, if you look at her legacy is one of quite destructive violence when you get down to it. So my thought here was, all right, can I do something with that, or do I need to separate those out into a conceptual, this is her as a ruler and this is her as an Avenger, or I don't know, a caster maybe. But then I thought about it for a second. I thought to that violence, and I realized that violence is also founded on a lot of lies, on a lot of sort of double meanings here. So having double summon B to me made some sense in that context. You have the ruler, the regal exterior, and under that you have the I'm going to bury the emissaries alive. sort of attitude about things. And that's also where I grab Deceptive Tactics A. It's going to be a bit of a twist on the normal tactics skill. It's less about predicting your opponent's moves and more coming up with a single trick that the opponent is going to fall for. In my mind, it's a little bit different than tactics, but if I were to really bring this back to early FGO, they probably would have made it tactics, but this is modern FGO. We're not making those basic copy-paste skills anymore. Subjugation of the Drevlian Sea. One anecdote I found with Olga of Kiyv was how she would collect tributes from the Drevlians after her subjugation of them. Tribute that she would use to sort of increase the wealth and capability of her and the Kievan Rus. So my thought here is that just she as a servant, it's not that she has unlimited resources to grab from, say someone like Gilgamesh who has a golden rule. No, it's more like people are very quick to appease her by giving her wealth. The patron saints of widows and converts C. So this is why she is a ruler. It was her stepping in and being a huge sort of push for the Christianization of her territory, even if her territory was not Christian prior to her. So my thought here is that as a leader, it's a charismatic thing. This is a variation on the same idea as charisma. I do add a note here that I think that this would affect not just the people in her presence, but those affected by her actions as well. So if she does something that benefits another person, they will also have that same inspiration from the charisma skill. So this is the Noble Phantasm, 3 pigeons, 3 sparrows, 3 lies, A rank. So this is an anti-army Noble Phantasm. The idea here is that final sort of deception of the Drevlians, where she, if you remember back to the history lesson, she got the three pigeons and the 3 sparrows and released them with sulfur tied to them, so that when they landed, they would burn down the entire city. This is my idea of what the Noble Phantasm would be, because this is sort of, in my opinion, the most striking sort of image I can think of with her, which ended up working out great with the sort of the fire imagery that the artist ended up going for. My thought here is that when its true name is deployed, a flock of birds litters the skies above, and I believe that it would have a stronger effect against those who would fall for the deception, or those who believe in, I have it here as the salvation by her hands. Those unprepared take more damage. Little obvious, little conceptual, I'll admit that. I have some extra notes here. I don't necessarily want to spend too much time on these, because these are available for if you look at the slideshow, but a lot of these are going to be if I failed to mention anything that really went into designing her from before. So yeah, this is the same sort of note as as the reason why I picked a ruler and hid the Avenger kit in there. As for alternate classes, I didn't go over this earlier. I do feel like there's a couple alternate classes that she could fit in. So outside of just being an Avenger version, which I think an Avenger version of her, I almost, just because of the way I did her this time, I would almost want that to be an inversion of it. I'd want it to be an Avenger who's got surprising, humility, a little bit of an oxymoron of a take on an Avenger, in my opinion. And then the other one is Assassin, and a huge part of that Assassin inspiration is actually from Nitocris, because it's that same sort of, I'm going to gain power by deception. So maybe it would focus heavily on how unsuspecting people would find her in presence. It's sort of a similar presence concealment situation to, say, someone like Semiramis. These are some servants I think that would go really well with her, as far as my room lines. Obviously, I didn't take the time to come up with individual my room lines, but I can give the logic for some of them. So with Saseki Kojiro and Miyamoto Iori, the both of them have Tsubame Gaishi, which is the killing of 3 sparrows at once with 1 sword strike. That felt like just a funny connection for me to make there. And then I brought up earlier the similarities I sort of grabbed onto in terms of Nitocris or Semiramis' take on their respective classes. So that's why I would have lines for them. So I have a Dobrynya Nikitich here because of the Slavic sort of connection. I think really you could have any of the sort of Slavic or even Russian heroic spirits have good lines with her. So Dobrynya Nikitich is kind of just here as a stand-in for that, but really any of them could work in that like just in that place of the Myram line. You can even have it be like all Slavic heroes have the same line from Olga of Kiyv. And lastly here I have Benny Enma because sparrows. And any Benny lines are always funny. So as far as combat goes, I've already brought up her Noble Phantasm. I think her combat style would be pretty much just like a lessened version of her Noble Phantasm. I don't even think she would be a particularly offensive servant as far as direct combat goes. A lot of my skills that I came up with focused a lot on tactics and controlling situations. I do feel like when she does fight, though, it would be with those with fire. So this is a funny little extra section I added here because I'm a fucking FGO addict. What would I imagine her being like in FGO? I feel like she would be she'd be a hybrid support DPS sort of character. Maybe a functional Arts Looper or maybe even Buster Looper. But I do think her primary sort of playstyle would be taking advantage of let's increase the party's attack, NP damage or NP gain kind of deal. So yeah, thanks again to the artist Winterwolf Drawings. I guess just at the end here, I would like to open this up to a little bit of discussion. Seki, is there like what are you thinking about the servant I designed?
Honestly, I'm a big fan. I think going into this, I had also like hypothesized that Avenger or Ruler would be the two classes possible, but I mean, her story shares almost one-to-one similarities with Nitocris. So Nitocris Assassin is not out of the question as far as adding an assassin. I do think it's really funny that both you and Winterwolf came up with a similar fire motif, even though I will preface, Winterwolf had none of the info about the FGO kit because she wouldn't have understood anything about it. So it is funny that you both came up individually with fire motifs like so strongly.
Yeah. I was actually pretty happy when she had the fire motif in there because it meant I didn't have to go back in and rework things. Because the way we went about this might seem odd. We both got the same historical like information from Seki. I did a little extra stuff on the side just to anything I was unclear on or anything I wanted to look into on my own side. But the both of us got that same information, and she came back with this design at around the same time I came back with the kit.
And there was also a section I didn't go over when I was talking about the history stuff. Like I completely skipped the little dress notes I have, which for sort of the viewing pleasure of anyone who decides to go take a look at the link or like pause the video at that point, those are all pulled. All that stuff is pulled from academic papers written about Slavic historical dress. I did send her that. So she got the actual 30-something page academic paper with images of Slavic historical dress.
It ended up working out decently well this time. If it hadn't worked out as well, though, if the design we got back was like, maybe she with a completely different motif than I did, what would have happened is I would have gone back and done the kit, redid the kit altogether. I would not have made her redo the art. We're giving a lot of, or at least for this one, we gave a lot of direction in what we're doing to the artist. The kit was just something I threw together as a, let's have this ready and then adjust as once I have the art.
But in the future, ideally, we'd have the art first, like significantly first.
Yeah.
Because we would like to do more of these in the future, or at least I would for certain, because this sort of fills my desire for all those characters that we don't have, but that I want. Like I have a fairly robust list of characters I'm interested in doing in this format, and like a lot of them don't necessarily have the most historical context. I mean, I really went in with detail on Olga because it felt, appropriate. I wouldn't have that much detail on like half the characters I have in my list,
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have characters that you're like, oh, this would make a good FGO servant, but hasn't been made into one.
Yeah.
So it opens up a nice area to go. And I do think it's one of the things I liked in your section was talking about the multiple classes, because I do feel like there are a lot of servants in FGO that could qualify for multiple classes, and I feel like only some of them get that.
Well, I based a lot of like how I went about like what I had to come up with even outside the kit off of what FGO material what they have to come up with in FGO materials. And a lot, I don't know if they do it in the more recent ones, but in the old Fate material stuff, a lot of the servants would be given a list of alternate classes they could qualify for. So that was sort of the idea there.
Yeah, that's fair. I also think this certainly, Winterwolf is a wonderful one of my artist friends to start with. But we've luckily, between us, since we're friends with a lot of very creative people, we do know a lot of people who are very interested in art and like to participate in things like this. Like it's fun for them, you know? Like Winterwolf came to me after she finished these, and she was asking more about, like, she was concerned that she'd made it like too open in the top, and that there were too many assets and such. And so I just kindly showed her some Raita drawings, and then she felt a whole lot better about her drawings, and then vowed that the next one she made would be more Raita-esque.
She's apparently a fan of the T.H.E.
She also mentioned that she would love to do a servant that she got to do more like mech style. So I think she's just enjoying the creativity, and I think I'm also enjoying that.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I made it such a point to make sure I had the intro all sorted before we started. But, like, I didn't even think for a second what the outro would be. We can't even hint. We don't know what the fuck is coming next.
But we really would love it if you guys would drop some feedback in the comments.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if we were to do more of these, is there anything you'd like to see on any of the creative sides here? Any, maybe I need to go more in depth on certain Fate things. Maybe you have some feedback on Seki's historical or literary sections. Anything, really. So, yeah. We'll see you guys next time. This is going up soon after recording.
Tomorrow. Literally tomorrow.
Good luck editing this.
Like, comment, subscribe.